The art world has many and varied things in it, limited only by human imaginations. But as we all know, human imagination can be a little bizarre at times. You just have to look at a surrealist painting to know what I mean. So I thought I'd show you my top 5 weirdest paintings today. Some are weird because the artist was experimenting with a new technique, some are weird to our modern eyes but were considered fine and dandy when they were made. So strap yourself in and let's get down the rabbit hole of strange. Our first image is by Rubens. It was painted in 1612 and is called Roman Charity. On first viewing, our 20th century eyes wonder what perverse tale is being told here. There's no way round it, this is definitely a young lady breastfeeding an old man. It's wonderfully composed, the muscle structure of the gentleman is beautifully painted. The painting has a depth to it accentuated by the shadows and the window in the background. But it's definitely a young woman breastfeeding an old man. So what's actually going on here? This is a depiction of an old story from Roman times. It was commonly painted at the time. There's even a fresco in Pompeii that tells the same story. It's the tale of Simon, the old man, and Pero, the young woman. They are in fact father and daughter. The father has been incarcerated and condemned to death by starvation. His daughter secretly gets into his cell and feeds him because they have no other choice. Does that make it a little less shocking? You be the judge. This is a story that has been illustrated many times over the years in different ways. In the 17th century, artists began adding a small child to the picture, perhaps to appeal to their audience in a different way. Does the addition of a child imply a more healthy family-related explanation? Later depictions show a mother replacing the father figure. Does that make it less incestuous? Do mothers and daughters have different kinds of relationships? Or does that just eroticize it in a completely different way? The most modern version I can find of the story is from 1969 in a painting by Maya Danzig called Partisan Ballad. The story is brought forward to a more modern conflict that the 20th century audience could sympathise with. So does that change your opinion of it? Tell me below in the comments. Henry Fuseli's Nightmare was painted in 1781. A goblin sits on a sleeping woman's chest with a menacing expression on his face while a horse stands in the background of the bedroom observing in shock. She is draped in an unnatural position, implying that she is not peacefully asleep. The staging of the image is a theatrical tableau. The lighting of the painting has great contrast between light and dark. This is a technique called chiaroscuro that is often seen in the paintings of Rubens and Caravaggio. The word nightmare is drawn from a Scandinavian myth where a goblin is known as a Mara. It has nothing to do with the horse, I'm afraid. He is a very menacing goblin sitting on her chest to make you think about paralysis and suffocation. Nightmares can make you physically uncomfortable, restricting your movement and breath. The third figure makes this even creepier. The triangle of a victim, an oppressor and an observer implies a sexual violence in this image that unnerves us. There are many horror films that use this triangle idea. A home invader standing in a bedroom watching the sleeping house owners, for example. Like the Rubens painting, the image has beauty in its composition and painting, but it is definitely unnerving for a number of reasons. What do you think is going on here? Tell me in the comments below. This painting was very successful, and not only did Fuseli paint several versions, but it has been parodied in political circles over and over again. It has also inspired literary works. Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley's mother, knew Fuseli personally, and it was an influence on her Frankenstein novel. Remember when the monster threatens to kill Frankenstein's wife on their wedding night? It's also said to have inspired Edgar Allan Poe to write Fall of the House of Usher. And the Ken Russell film Gothic also directly copied the tableau in one of the scenes. Tell me in the comments if you know of any other films that it's popped up in. This is a painting from 1889 called The Autopsy, Professor Poirier of Paris. Very little is known about the German artist Annie Hopf. Probably because this image was painted by a woman, and the men wrote the history in the 19th century, but that's a bee in my bonnet for another day. Paintings of the dead are actually quite common before the invention of the camera. They were a learning tool for students. The anatomy books had to be made by someone, and the doctors needed to be taught. The word theatre actually comes from the surgical procedures of these times. Students and the public would pay to watch an operation in a lecture hall. Fabulously hygienic, I think you'll find, and it became entertainment on some level as well as an educational tool. Whilst we might find this idea strange and morbid today, it was common practice, as were the paintings of the spectacle. There is no theatre to this painting though. It's very quiet, a lone man doing his job, learning about the human form without the ceremony of a public space. This leads me to a few questions about it. Why is it so peaceful? Does the artist or the doctor know the deceased? Was the artist fascinated with death, led by trauma? Is she silencing some of her own demons with this painting? Tell me in the comments what you think is going on here. Historians are uncertain as to when the Garden of Earthly Delights was painted, but put it between 1480 and 1505. It was painted by Artymous Bosch, a Dutch painter. It is a triptych, which means it is made of 3 separate panels that are hinged together so that it might stand and be closed up like a set of doors. The outer sides are often painted as well, depicting further work when the painting is closed up. The closed panels describe the creation of the world, with God in the corner, creating, and an inscription that reads, "For he spake and it was done, he commanded and it stood fast." The opened panels show Eden on the left, with Eve being presented to Adam, lucky her. In the middle are the sins of earth, and on the right are the consequences of such sin, the penalties for not conducting oneself in a chaste manner. It's one of those paintings that you find yourself looking at for a long time because it just is so full of weirdness. In the central panel there are people growing flowers out of their orifices, there are creatures of unnatural proportions, pig nuns, and people generally having a good time. I think they're having a good time anyway. By contrast, the right-hand panel is a scatological story of what awaits you if you enjoy yourself too much in life. People getting squashed, decapitated, and generally punished in new and interesting ways. It's a Where's Wally of all Satan's little goblins. The whole triptych is a moralistic tale that is synonymous with the attitudes of the Middle Ages. It is unclear as to whether it was made for a church altar or for a private patron. Some say it's far too nasty to have been made for a house of prayer, but others would say it's suitably moralistic for a time when religion stood on the backs of fear and oppression of its parishioners. Tell me what you think in the comments. This painting can be found in the National Gallery in London. It's a political painting by Hans Holbein, painted in 1533. It's called The Ambassadors. The 2 men in question are the French ambassadors to England, George de Selve on the left and Jean de Danteville on the right. They stand amongst various paraphernalia of science, music and religion, and many of the instruments are wrong, with anomalies and scientific inconsistencies to show the political and religious disharmony of the time. So far so sensible, you say. It's an interesting satire, but what's weird about it? Why is it on the list, Rose? But have you seen what's on the floor? There's a weird wobbly shape between their feet that makes no sense. What the hell is it? It's an anamorphic skull. If you view it from the right hand side of the painting, you can see the skull because of the angle of view. It is said that the painting was to be viewed in a narrow corridor or stairwell, and so would be viewed differently from a normal painting. Some say that Holbein was just trying to be clever to show his skill. Some say it's another element of the disharmony. Everything else in the painting is somewhat out of joint, and this is just another layer. What do you think his point was? Tell me what you think in the comments. So, Rose, you say you're an artist. How the jolly hell did he do it? It's messing with my brain. Well, a picture of a skull will have been drawn correctly, and then a grid put over it. The grid is then redrawn using trapezoids, and the image transferred into its corresponding squares on the new grid. A stretched image that is corrected through the viewing angle. So there you have it, 5 of the weirdest paintings I could find. If I missed off your favourite, be sure to let me know in the comments. Click below to sign up for the Artymous weekly newsletter. If you do, you'll get art tips and insider information on the art courses I run. If you need more Artymous in your life, you can also contact me that way to get an individual tutorial too. So click the link, subscribe to the channel and give your art practice a boost. It is unclear as to whether it was made for a church altar or for a pirate. Oh my god! I'm just going to read this whole paragraph again. Because blah.